Welcome back to Season 2 of That's So Second Millennium, the Catholic Science podcast, where we look forward to the new synthesis in the new millennium between faith, philosophy, and science. Welcome back. This is episode 84 of That's So Second Millennium. Well, I had a massive proposal due on the 1st of November, and so Bill and I convened an emergency session on the 2nd of November, and we rambled on for an hour and a quarter about this and that. Bill wanted to talk about Jordan Peterson, and we also wanted to talk about the gold masses. So there's 50 minutes of recording before the part that I'm going to choose to start this episode. We're going to start with a discussion about the gold masses, and then we come back to Jordan Peterson and the question of what one can do with one's life at the end. We'll see how we make that segue. I think we did all right. So in any case, I'm not sure what we'll do with the rest of that material. It may just be preparation for conversations further down the line. Haven't made up my mind yet. But yeah, and in fact, this is a good episode because we actually get to let Bill do a lot of the talking because I'm sort of psychologically numb at this point. So it's good. Good to hear from Bill. Bill has some interesting things to say. So with that, I will leave you to it.
It might be good to just focus the whole podcast on pointing out a few of the features that have been added to the Society of Catholic Scientists website, one of them being probably the only place online where you will find the collection of announcements about gold masses. And it couldn't be more timely because a lot of the masses are clustered around the feast day of St. Albert the Great, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's November 15th?
Yes. Yep. That's in 2 weeks.
And
2 weeks.
And indeed, one of those masses is one that you've had a big role in concepting and implementing, right, in Indianapolis.
Yeah, I went to. Oh wow, there's going to be one in Los Alamos. Look at that. Yes.
Yeah, I saw that. Yes.
That's going to be fascinating.
Isn't that cool? Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. See if I can pull up one of those lists. But yeah, no, I took it upon myself to see if I could gather enough Catholic scientists here to have a gold mass here, and the Archbishop gave his. Here we go. The Archbishop gave his. Of course, it's just a link to the CatholicScientist.org list of gold masses. Okay, well that's good. Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and have that at the cathedral on Friday the 15th at 5:15 p.m. So, and then we'll have dinner afterward. Whoever is there. So, but yeah.
Is there any sense of who is likely to be attending? Has the outreach gone to particular schools or
pretty modest at this point? I have reached out to the different universities in the area, and now that I've done with this massive proposal that was due yesterday, and I can see what I plan to do with the rest of my life.
Right.
There's there's a double handful of people who've said they're coming or expressed interest, so we'll see.
Well, these things do. What's the Bible quote from Old Testament? Despise not the day of small beginnings.
Small beginnings, yeah. I hope not. And knowing that, and then Jesus talks about the mustard seed. So.
Oh, exactly. Right.
But yeah. So. We'll have a handful of people in a little fellowship, and, of course, I'm in a position where I don't know where I'll be living next year. So I hope that that seems like a good enough idea to the people there that one or more of them will undertake the modest responsibility of continuing to make sure that it happens next year. But
I think that's, you've planted a seed in one of the country's biggest archdioceses. So that's pretty good.
I guess I have no idea where it rates in terms of size, but yeah.
I would imagine it's, and then I love planting the seed. Somebody else has obviously done that with the national labs, like Los Alamos. Wow.
Yes, cool. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. It's a short and interesting enough list. I'm going to read it off. It's
all right.
Bismarck, North Dakota.
Yes.
Bishop David Kagan is going to celebrate the one in Bismarck, North Dakota. Now that That's impressive. I like that.
Uh-huh.
Cambridge, Massachusetts at MIT. Graduate chaplain Harvard is going, Father George Salzman is going to celebrate that one, 7:30 p.m. November 15th in Indianapolis, 5:15 p.m. November 15th, Friday in St. Paul, Minnesota. Father Matt Shireman is the one to contact anyway. Ithaca at Cornell.
Yes, with our friend Professor Lunine possibly in attendance. That's hypothetical.
Father Dan McMullen, 5:15 p.m. on Friday. 5 p.m. on Friday in St. Louis, Missouri. Apparently you're doing this chronological order, taking time zones into account.
Right.
5:30 p.m. Friday at Los Alamos, where the odds are good, but the goods are odd. I'm sorry, that's a terrible joke. Just commenting on the prospects of a woman going to work in a heavily male-dominated environment and looking for a husband. That's an old joke about Los Alamos in particular.
Is that right? I had not heard that.
If you're in hard science, and if you're in hard science and have any contact with like nuclear anything, which I did as a PhD student, the homilist is Deacon Raymond Alcoof, retired Los Alamos National Lab scientist and fellow of the American Nuclear Society. That's going to be, wait for it, explosive. No.
Oh my gracious! Oh, you're thinking lower and lower.
I know. I
know. My goodness!
9 p.m. on Friday. 9 p.m. on Friday in Providence.
I love it. 9
All right,
p.m.
and of course that's going to be Father Nicanor Austriaco.
Terrific.
5:30 p.m. in Vancouver, BC. 12:15 p.m. Okay, now we're out of order now. I don't know. Rochester, New York, the University of Rochester. Toronto, Ontario, 7 p.m. Wow. I mean, if which he's not. If Jordan Peterson were to show up at one of them, it would be the University of Toronto, but he's not. Jeff Lord. We talked to him. He's the contact there, apparently.
Yeah. So
that's good. Good for him.
Good.
Waterloo, Ontario. Father Mark Morley, 7 p.m. at St. Michael's Catholic Church. It's November 20th, Wednesday. Lisle, Illinois at Benedictine University. Matt Wiesner is the contact there. Father John Cartier. Reception at 6. A talk at 7 by Father Cartier on the Mystery of Faith from Gold Mass to Gravity Waves. Wow. Somebody's going to stick that on YouTube.
Whoa.
Gold Mass to Gravity Waves.
Wow, I like it.
Yeah. On Thursday, November 21st, a week before Thanksgiving, Our Lady of the Wisdom Chapel, Grand Rapids, Michigan, at Aquinas College. Father Robert Killer, believe it or not, he's an OP at Aquinas College, believe it or not.
That's a Dominican institution, right?
I think it must be.
Aquinas College, yeah.
There will be a lecture at 7 p.m. given by Stephen M. Barr. He's
terrific.
Going to be out there, so that must be why they're scheduling it for that day.
Very good. Very good.
Intriguing. Good for them. All right. Well, yeah. So hopefully there will be more. People might throw in together in the last couple of weeks here, or do it another time, because of course there's nothing that says it has to be done on or near November 15th. So.
But it really does call attention to the important role that the Society of Catholic Scientists is playing in just bringing about this phenomenon, still incipient, but nevertheless pretty robust over the past few years to get these gold masses going.
Mm-hmm.
And it's partly that significant effort by folks like Father Nicanor and Stephen Barr, and partly, I think, just that there's an underlying need, an increasing awareness of the need for this public statement of and seeking prayerful support of the compatibility between science and religion.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing. It's such a tired old canard. I mean, it just, I'm groping for. I would like to go off on one last tirade of the ones, all the ones that we recorded today, because I'm a little incoherent today. But so I'm not going to try to press it when it's obviously not going to happen. But nevertheless, it is a tired old doctrine that we need anything that we can do to shut it down and remind one another that, in fact, this completely makes sense to be both Catholic and a scientist.
Yes, yes.
It's just not. It's not realism to say that those are irrevocably opposed.
I think that people are seeing some improvement in the understanding of the compatibility between science and religion. Part of it is efforts like the Society of Catholic Scientists. Part of it is efforts like the Science and Religion Initiative that the McGrath Institute at Notre Dame is conducting, and similar things, for instance, the efforts of the Magis Center and Father Bob Spitzer out in California, and the great website work that he's been doing to evangelize on this subject. So I think there is some improvement, and that's helping to boost support for things like the gold masses. And frankly, apart from the theology of it, I can't help but think that as times get tougher for a lot of people, and as we cast about culturally from one institution to another, well, now that we've kind of weakened religion as an institution, we've turned to science, and that's holding up pretty well, because there's a lot of really good people of integrity in that. But we've also turned to politics and government to the point where we're so many
charlatans.
Right. so many people are talking about socialism as the answer, which is really their way of saying big government,
right,
big spending, and big materialism is the answer, right? And so, but we're seeing that I don't think that will stand the acid test of election battles in most places in the country. And
I mean, we'll see.
It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, we're watching politics just rock back and forth from, it's trying to, push itself into more and more extreme. And of course, it's good for me to listen to this audiobook that I mentioned to you before we started recording the piece that we're actually going to release about the about the financial whirlwinds that streaked across the world repeatedly from the First World War through the 30s.
Now, mention the title of that again.
Oh, that was The Lords of Finance is the name of that book. It was it won an award or something for some organization's best history book of the year, I think, in 2009.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I would
came
like
out
to
at
read
an interesting time. I guess the guy is
right.
The author's originally from Kenya. His name is something like Liaquat Ahmed. I don't have it in front of me right now. But so I don't have to or want to go through a book review of it. It is an interesting book, but just to be reminded of, things have been more extreme. Yes, there have been times when Hitler could get a hearing, and as much as people want to scream and use his name to, tar their political opponents with, we don't have a Hitler going right now.
Right.
Fortunately, nowhere actually at this point, certainly nowhere on the planet in a country of comparable size and wealth to Germany of the 1930s, we do not have a Hitler going anywhere right now. We have bad people. We have people who should not be leading countries. We have those in spades. Leave the United States out of it. But Russia? China? Really?
Yeah.
Those people belong in charge of those governments, really? And you could just, you could walk the world and find people who are that level of bad and are certainly, and certainly death is following in their wake, and horrible human catastrophes have and continue to follow upon their actions and inactions.
Yes.
But we don't have a Hitler right now. We don't have a Stalin right now in charge of anything like that size of a country. We should take steps to avoid it, but we should also sort of dial down the hysteria.
That's right.
That's my
right. Yeah. No, there will always be countries and cultures that are falling victim to that kind of culture of death in particular ways. But what's missing at the moment is, I guess, the hegemonic intent that Hitler evinced. But the forces of terrorism in general, in a sense, are at least potentially.
I mean, the good thing about it is that there are people as evil as Hitler in the world, but fortunately they don't have his power.
Exactly.
They have resources.
Yeah. But now is definitely the time to be nipping it in the bud to the degree that we can, and ultimately it's really just something that we can do on an individual basis and within the Catholic Church and other churches.
That is the all important thing: is what can I do? What does charity ask me specifically to do? Yes,
yeah, and that's something that we were talking about the interview between Jordan Peterson and Patrick Coffin, and one thing that Peterson said that I wrote down, at least paraphrasing, he said, your life properly conducted has a truly wide-ranging positive impact on the world. And so when we say, well, what can one person do? We kind of fatalistically say, gee, the only thing we can do about everything from the church sexual abuse crisis to global climate change to everything else, we wind up saying, well, it has to start with the individual. And a lot of times that sounds like it's almost an admission of defeat. It's almost like, the Benedict option in miniature, right? We retreat within our own four walls, even within our own lives.
Well, Jordan, you can do it that way, but you can do it the opposite way too. What were you going to say about Jordan Peterson's take on it?
Oh, right. No, Jordan Peterson is saying that it's in no way a admission of defeat to take on this project in one's individual life. And he's a clinical psychologist as well as a professor who has seen that, if one adopts this in one's personal life as, an effort to make the world better by being a better person, that it really can have an impact, not just on the person who gets better, but he is personally convinced, and he's not necessarily a man of explicit faith right now, but he's convinced just from the evidence that he's seen that this can have an impact, a good impact on the world.
Mm-hmm.
It reaches a critical mass of individual effort having a real impact. And I think that's why Jordan Peterson is seen as such a source of inspiration by so many people now.
I mean, there's also there's the fact that, even on, the real single human life, you can affect dozens and hundreds of people. And if you haven't, changed the entire world, that's kind of what did the other 6 billion people have to say about it?
That's right. Yep.
They have just as much dignity as you have. It's kind of an insanity that we're subject to, that we can sort of leave that out. What they want from the situation is just as important as what I think is most important in the situation.
Right. Yeah. The other thing that I liked about, there were many things in that interview with Peterson, but he also said that from his own personal experience, he knows that speaking up about certain political and policy issues, as he's done in Canada, can be a risk, and it can be somewhat detrimental to the circumstances of your life. You're taking a lot of heat from the media and everybody else.
Yeah.
But what I loved was his next statement, namely that not speaking up is even worse. If you're holding back on principles that you believe are truly necessary for yourself and for others, and you're being cowed into silence and inaction, that's not only bad for a world that you could be impacting in some way, but it's also bad for you, because you kind of lose your sense of meaning, your purpose, self-confidence, connection to something bigger than yourself, the common good, as well as to the greater good and to God ultimately. And he sees that. Mm-hmm. And that's I thought that was a really neat part of that interview.
Yeah, it is corrosive to see good that you could do and refuse to do it. Yeah.
And that's why we do see a lot of people trying to do good by their own lights, by being activists on this issue or that issue, fighting for justice and fighting against various wrongs. But I don't think that in the absence of some kind of faith or some system of common good values, I don't think you can really have a structured approach that is really needed. It tends to become more egotistical and more random. Exactly, and it almost works against itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's almost individual disempowerment, ultimately resulting from something that we thought was going to be individually empowering, namely, dropping the shackles, the so-called shackles of religion and faith. I think you need some recourse to that in most public discourse situations.
Yeah.
How you doing? I think probably we've got enough.
It's about time for me to sign off. And
here too.
I think we're at the point where we have a.
If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. You can email a link to this episode at thatsosecondmillennium.net, share the post for this episode from our Facebook page, or you can use your podcast app's built-in sharing feature.